I wasn't supposed to be on the roof that night. Honestly, I wasn't supposed to be awake. I'd had one of those days, the kind that feels like you've been slowly wrung out, like a towel twisted until every drop is gone. My boss had yelled at me for something I didn't do. The train home stalled between stations for 20 minutes, and by the time I made it up the 5 flights to my apartment, I didn't want to hear a single human voice ever again. So instead of collapsing into bed like a functional adult, I grabbed the warm can of Coke that had been sitting on my counter for 3 days, climbed out my bedroom window, and made my way up the fire escape to the roof. The rooftop wasn't glamorous. It was uneven, half covered in gravel, and the metal vents rattled whenever the wind blew in just the right direction. My building was old enough that you could feel it sigh at night, like it was tired too. But from up there, the city always looked softer, less loud, less angry, less like it was swallowing you whole. I'd been going up there for months, but I'd never seen him before. He was already sitting at the far end, back against the low wall, one knee bent, the other stretched out, like he owned the place. Skinny jeans, black boots, and a dark jacket, even though it was warm enough that I was sweating in a t-shirt. He had the hood up, but the wind kept blowing it back just enough for me to catch glimpses. Jawline sharp as a blade, nose slightly crooked like it had been broken once, a single silver ring in his left ear glinting under the streetlight glow. He turned his head when he heard me climbing up, but he didn't move. Didn't say anything either. For a second, I thought about going back down, but something in the way he looked at me, steady but not unfriendly, made me stay. "Hey," I said, awkward but trying. He nodded once. "Hey." We stared at the skyline like two strangers, pretending we weren't aware of each other's existence. I sat down about 10 feet away, cracked open my Coke, and pretended like this was totally normal. Like I didn't feel his eyes flick toward me every so often. Like I wasn't curious about why the hell he was on my roof. After a while, he spoke without looking at me. "You come up here a lot?" His voice surprised me. Quiet, rough around the edges, but not in a scary way. More like a guy who didn't talk much unless he had something worth saying. "Yeah," I admitted. "Helps me feel like I'm not drowning." He gave a short laugh. Not mocking, more like he recognized the feeling. "Yeah," he said softly. "I get that." Wind swept across the rooftop then, cool despite the summer air, carrying the distant noise of traffic and some bass-heavy music from a party a few streets over. For a moment, it felt like we were floating above everything. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket but didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers. "You ever think about," he said slowly, "how weird it is that we're all stacked on top of each other in this city, thousands of people shoved into the same few blocks, but most of the time we don't notice each other at all?" "Yeah," I said. "It's lonely, even when you're surrounded." A gust of wind pushed his hood back farther, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. He ran a hand through it, almost shyly, before glancing at me for the first time long enough that I felt it in my chest. "You're not like the people down there," he murmured. "You look like you see things." "Is that good?" I asked. "Depends what you're seeing." He finally lit the cigarette. The flame briefly illuminated his face, eyes darker than the sky behind him, tired in a way I recognized too well. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Or maybe an hour. Time felt different up there. He asked what kept me awake at night. I asked why he liked rooftops. He said he liked being high enough that he could breathe, but not so high he felt like he'd disappear. "But if you disappeared," I said, "nobody up here would notice." He gave me a small, sad smile. "Exactly." I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions. "Who are you? Do you live here? Why do you look like you're carrying something too heavy for one person?" But I didn't, and he didn't offer. Eventually he stood, flicked his cigarette off the edge, and shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "Guess I should go," he said. "Will I see you again?" I don't know why I asked. I just did. He paused. Not long, but enough that I felt it. Probably not. He walked past me, close enough that I felt the heat of him for a second, and then climbed down the fire escape without another word. And that was it, our only conversation. But the next morning, when I stepped onto the roof and saw the tiny burn shape of his last cigarette on the gravel, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I couldn't stop thinking about him. For a week, I tried to pretend he didn't exist. It wasn't like we'd exchanged numbers or even names. He'd been a ghost that showed up on a random night, said a few things that shouldn't have mattered, and then vanished into the city like everyone else does. I didn't owe him space in my head, but that didn't stop him from taking it. Every time I went up to the roof after that, I half expected to find him sitting there again, legs dangling over the edge, cigarette glowing in the dark. But there was only silence. The kind that made the city feel too big, like it was mocking me for waiting on something that wasn't coming. Still, I kept going up there. Same time. Same spot. Same warm can of Coke. I told myself it was just routine, not hope. But one night, about 10 days later, I found something small lying near where he'd been sitting. A matchbook. Black. Worn. With the faint white logo of a bar called Haven. I didn't recognize it. When I opened it, there was one match left, and a phone number scrawled inside in messy handwriting. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it, the city buzzing below like static. I tried to tell myself it couldn't be his. People left stuff everywhere up here. Half the time, I'd find bottle caps or gum wrappers blown in from other buildings, but the thought wouldn't leave my head. The bar name, the number, the timing, it had to be him. I didn't call. Not right away. Instead, I looked up Haven. It was a dive bar, across town, one of those dim places with a red neon sign that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the 90s. The kind of place that either had amazing live music or the kind of locals you avoided eye contact with. I told myself I wasn't gonna go. Then, the next night, I went. The bar was small and narrow, half lit with red light that made everyone look a little unreal. The air smelled like whiskey and old wood. A tired bartender was wiping glasses behind the counter, and a guy was tuning a guitar in the corner, testing a mic that squealed too loud. I slid onto a stool near the back and ordered a beer I didn't really want. I didn't see him at first. Then I heard a voice. Low, rough, familiar. He was sitting in a booth near the window, talking to someone I couldn't see. He had the same black jacket on, hood down this time. His hair was a little longer than I remembered, messier like he'd been running his hands through it all night. He laughed at something his friend said, a soft, quiet laugh that made something in my chest tighten. I told myself to leave, to just get up, walk out, forget this whole thing. But I didn't. Instead, I waited, watched, tried not to look like some creep who'd followed him here. When his friend got up to use the restroom, he glanced around, and his eyes landed on me. It took him a second to recognize me, but when he did, his lips parted slightly. Then that same faint smile. You again. I stood up before I could think better of it. You left your number on the roof. He frowned, like he had to process that. Then realization hit, and he gave a short, amused breath. You found that? Guess I dropped it. Was it for me? I asked. He tilted his head. Would you rather it wasn't? The question made my stomach twist. I didn't answer, just slid into the seat across from him. He watched me for a moment, then said, Didn't think you'd come. I didn't either. That got a small grin out of him. Something real this time. He took a sip of his drink, eyes not leaving mine. So what now? You want to talk about the meaning of life again? I laughed under my breath. You make it sound like I brought a list of philosophical questions. Didn't you? He teased. You seem like the type. He wasn't wrong. But I deflected. You're the one who started with the whole, what if we disappeared thing. Yeah, he said softly. Guess that's my thing. There was a pause. A quiet between us that didn't feel awkward this time. Just heavy. Why do you come up there? I finally asked. That roof. He took his time answering, tracing the rim of his glass with a finger. Used to live in the building across the street. I still go up there sometimes when I can't sleep. Yours had the better view. Of what? He shrugged. Everything. Something about the way he said it, like he was talking about more than the skyline, made me want to know everything about him right then. His story, his name, his reasons for haunting rooftops at midnight. But all I said was, I'm Aaron. He blinked, surprised. Aaron. Then he smiled a little. Eli. The name suited him. We sat there for another hour, talking about nothing again. How the bar used to have a jukebox before it broke, how the owner keeps fake plants because he can't keep real ones alive, how Eli doesn't drink beer because he says it tastes like wet bread. When I finally looked at the clock, it was past 1. "Guess we're keeping the rooftop hours," he said as he stood. I followed him outside. The night air was colder than it had any right to be in late summer. He lit another cigarette, and for a second, under the glow of the streetlight, I saw him clearly for the first time. He looked tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. "Why'd you give me your number?" I asked quietly. He exhaled smoke, watching it vanish. "Did I? You tell me." He looked at me then, a slow smile curling at the edge of his mouth. "Maybe I just wanted to see if you'd find it. And if I didn't, then I'd know you weren't the kind of person who looks up." He said it so casually, but it hit like a whisper straight to my chest. Then he flicked his cigarette into the gutter and started walking away, hands deep in his pockets. He didn't say goodbye, and I didn't call after him. But this time, I knew his name, and that was enough to make it impossible to stop thinking about him. After that night at Haven, I didn't see Eli again for a while. I didn't know if I was supposed to text him, if the number in the matchbook still worked, or if it was just a breadcrumb he'd left behind on a whim. That seemed like something he'd do. Eli didn't seem like the kind of guy who planned anything. More like the kind who drifted in and out of people's lives, like wind through an open window. Quiet. Temporary. But once you notice the breeze, you can't unfeel it. He stayed in my head like a lyric I couldn't place. I'd be at work steaming milk behind the espresso machine, and out of nowhere, I'd hear the way he said my name. Just once, soft like he was tasting it. I'd be brushing my teeth at night, and I'd remember how he looked under the red neon light, tired, but a little amused, like everything was a cosmic joke that only he got. I tried not to obsess. I wasn't a teenager. I wasn't lonely. At least that's what I told myself. But 3 days later, I saw him again, totally by accident. I was walking back from a late shift, hands in my pockets, earbuds in, hoodie pulled up. The sidewalk was slick with mist from the earlier rain, and the streetlights cast that yellow-orange glow that made everything feel like a movie I didn't ask to be in. Then I passed a bodega, and there he was, inside, standing at the refrigerated section in the back, bent over slightly as he read the label on a bottle of iced coffee. Same dark jacket, same untamed hair, except this time I caught something else, something quieter in his posture. He looked lost. I stopped walking before I could think about it. Just stood there, half hidden behind the plastic flag of a lotto sign, staring like a creep. Then, as if he sensed it, he looked up. Our eyes met through the window. He didn't smile this time, just raised his eyebrows like, well, this is weird, and gave the smallest shrug before turning and walking toward the cashier. I ducked inside before he could vanish again. He was at the register, tapping his fingers on the counter, waiting for the guy to bag his drink and a pack of smokes. "Stalking me now?" he asked when he heard me approach. I rolled my eyes. "I could ask you the same. This is my neighborhood." He said, non-committal, as he handed over cash. "Maybe I knew that. You following me, Eli?" He looked over his shoulder, one side of his mouth tugging into something that might have been a smile or a dare. "You gonna be weird if I say yes?" "You already are." That earned a soft chuckle, the kind you only get out of someone when you've accidentally said something honest. Outside, he lit a cigarette immediately. He offered me one without asking if I smoked. I didn't, but I took it anyway. I didn't light it, just held it between my fingers like it was some kind of shared silence. "So," he said, leaning against the wall. "You live close?" I nodded. 2 blocks that way. "You gonna invite me over?" He said it like a joke, but there was a pause at the end. Like part of him meant it. I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to turn something quiet and strange into something rushed and messy. Or maybe I just didn't know what I wanted from him. Maybe I still don't. Instead, I said, "Want to come back to the roof?" He looked at me sideways, a hint of surprise in his eyes. You serious? Yeah, just us, like before. For a second, I thought he was going to say no. His gaze dropped to the sidewalk like he was doing math in his head. Then he exhaled and flicked the ash off his cigarette. Yeah, he said. Okay. Back at my building, we didn't talk as we climbed the fire escape. It was a familiar quiet. Comfortable, not heavy. The wind was picking up again, cooler now, hinting that the tail end of summer was slipping toward fall. When we reached the top, he walked straight to the same spot as last time, sat down like nothing had changed. Except this time, I sat closer. Only a couple feet between us. He didn't comment on it. For a while, we just looked out over the city. I thought about you, I said after a long silence. He didn't flinch, just flicked his gaze toward me. Why? I shrugged. You ever meet someone and feel like you're supposed to? His expression shifted, just barely. His lips parted, like he wanted to say something, but instead, he ran a hand through his hair and looked back at the skyline. I don't believe in that, he said eventually. The whole fate thing. Why not? Because people always leave. Doesn't matter how they showed up, or why. They leave. His voice was even, but there was something under it. A crack he was trying hard to plaster over. I didn't say anything. Instead, I pulled the crumpled matchbook from my pocket and held it out. This yours? He looked at it. Smiled faintly. Yeah, so you did leave it for me. I didn't think you'd actually find it. You wanted me to. He didn't answer, just looked at me like I was a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. Then, quietly, you're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone forgettable. The words hit harder than I expected them to, not because they were cruel, but because they felt honest. Like he was admitting something without knowing he was. I stared at him, at the lines around his eyes that made him look older than he probably was, at the cigarette burning low between his fingers, at the way he never quite seemed to settle into his own body. You don't have to leave, I said, not even sure what I meant. He looked at me, really looked. Then he said, maybe I do. He said it quietly, almost like he didn't expect me to catch it. Maybe I do. And then he looked away, like that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Not for me. I wanted to ask what he meant. Why he felt like he had to leave. Why someone like him, guarded, sharp, beautiful, in that fragile, jagged kind of way, was up on rooftops at midnight saying cryptic things to strangers. But I didn't. Because I could see it on his face. He didn't want to be asked. He wanted to be understood without having to explain. So I just sat there, beside him, close enough that my shoulder almost touched his. Neither of us said anything for a while. The city stretched out beneath us, glittering and humming like it was trying to distract us from the fact that something was shifting. Finally, Eli broke the silence. You ever wish you could hit pause? He asked. I blinked. On what? Everything. I nodded slowly. Yeah, all the time. He leaned his head back against the brick wall behind us, closing his eyes for a second. The glow from the nearby billboard lit his face in soft gold. He looked tired, not just physically, existentially tired, like the kind of worn out that sleep can't fix. I feel like I'm always one step ahead of a crash, he murmured. Like if I stop moving, something's gonna catch up and destroy everything I've barely managed to hold together. I didn't know what to say to that. Not really, but I knew the feeling. You ever let someone help you carry it? I asked. He gave a dry laugh. Not really my style. Maybe it should be. He looked at me then, and for a moment there was something raw in his eyes. Not attraction, not even trust. Just that quiet, painful awareness of being seen. I don't know how long we sat there like that, staring at each other under the empty sky, the space between us charged with something quiet and electric. Then, without a word, he shifted closer. Not dramatically, no cinematic lean-in, no sudden kiss, just a subtle, hesitant movement. His knee brushed mine, and he didn't move away. I turned slightly to face him, and for the first time, I reached out, slowly, letting my fingers graze the side of his hand. Testing. He didn't flinch, didn't pull back, just looked down at our hands, then up at me. "You're really not scared of this?" he asked, voice low. I swallowed. "Of you? Of what this might be?" I thought about lying, saying something light. But I didn't. "I'm terrified," I said, "but I still want to be here." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned his hand over so our palms touched. It wasn't dramatic. Wasn't romantic in the way people write about in poems. But it meant more than any kiss ever could. We sat like that until the wind picked up, and the billboard shut off and the city seemed to go quiet. Eventually, he let go of my hand and stood. "I should go," he said, not apologetic, not evasive, just honest. "Okay," I replied. He looked down at me like he was memorizing something. Then, before I could say anything else, he added, "Same time tomorrow?" It was the most casual thing in the world, but it cracked something open in my chest. I nodded. "Yeah, I'll be here." Eli gave the smallest smile, and then he climbed down the fire escape and disappeared into the night again. But this time, it didn't feel like the end. I was on the roof before the sun went down. The whole day felt like one long inhale, waiting to be exhaled. My shift dragged. Every coffee I poured at the cafe, just another minute closer to midnight. I don't remember most of the customers, just the way I kept checking the clock, wondering if he'd show, wondering what I'd do if he didn't. When I finally climbed the fire escape that night, my palms were damp. Not from the heat, just nerves. The kind that hum under your skin and make you feel like you're about to jump out of your own body. He was already there. Same spot, hoodie on, cigarette between his fingers. Except this time, he wasn't slouched back or staring at the skyline. He was sitting forward, arms resting on his knees, looking like he was waiting for me. When he saw me, he didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed, just slightly. "You're early," he said. "So are you." He flicked his cigarette off the side without even taking a drag. "Guess I wanted to make sure it wasn't in my head." "What wasn't?" "That you'd come back." I sat down beside him, closer this time, no hesitation. "I told you I would." He gave a soft snort. "People say a lot of things. Doesn't mean they mean them." I looked at him, trying to read between the lines. The way his jaw tensed. The flicker of something heavy behind his eyes. "You've been let down a lot," I said. He didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I didn't push. I just let the silence grow between us until it felt less like a wall and more like a blanket. "Do you sleep?" I asked after a while. He shook his head. "Not really." "Nightmares?" "Memories. Want to talk about them?" "Not yet." That was fine. I didn't need everything. Not tonight. Instead, I asked, "What do you do during the day?" He looked surprised by the question. "Odd jobs. Work when I can. Sometimes construction, sometimes delivery. Whatever keeps me moving." "You don't like to stay in one place?" "No," he said. "I get itchy." I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. I used to feel like that. Before I moved here. "Why'd you come?" "Because I thought I'd finally want to stay." He looked at me then. Really looked. And something in his face softened. "Do you?" he asked. I hesitated. I think I might. But it's not about the place anymore. That made him shift slightly, like the weight of that answer was almost too much. "You're a lot more serious than I thought," he said. "I could say the same about you." Fair. The wind picked up again. A few blocks over, a siren wailed in the distance. The city never really goes quiet. But up here, it always felt like it tried. "I like this," he said almost to himself. "Like what?" "This." He gestured vaguely between us. "Just being, not pretending. Not performing. You don't have to do either with me." He nodded slowly. That's the weird part. We sat there for what felt like hours, not touching, not needing to. Eventually, he leaned back, eyes to the sky. You ever wonder what it would have been like if we'd met some other way? Like how? Some party, a friend of a friend, on the train. I thought about it, about seeing him under fluorescent lights or in a crowded bar. It wouldn't have been the same, I said. No? I think it had to be the roof, middle of the night, no one else, no noise. He looked over at me, something fragile and warm in his expression. Yeah, he said, I think you're right. Then, without warning, he leaned in, barely, and kissed me, just once, just enough. It wasn't perfect. Our noses bumped, his lips were dry, and mine were chapped. But it was the kind of kiss you remember even when everything else fades. Because it meant something. When he pulled back, he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Neither did I. We just stayed there, together, under the stars, above the city. Two people who weren't supposed to meet, finding something neither of us knew we needed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want the night to end. He didn't stay the night. After the kiss, we just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, not saying much. At some point, he got up, brushed gravel off his jeans, and mumbled something like, "See you soon." Then he disappeared down the fire escape like he'd never been there at all. But something had changed. I woke up the next morning with the shape of him still in my head. Not just his face, or the way he kissed me, tentative but sure, but everything else, the way he talked, the way he looked at the city like it was some beast he couldn't quite fight off. The weight of whatever he wasn't saying, it stayed with me all day. Through the rush of morning customers and the hiss of the espresso machine, through the usual distractions and small talk, I couldn't shake him, didn't even want to try. That night, I waited on the roof. He didn't come. I tried not to let it mean anything. People get busy, people disappear for a night. But then it became 2 nights, then 3, and that old doubt started to slip back in. The kind I thought I'd grown out of. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he kissed me and panicked. Maybe I'd misread everything. But on the 4th night, just when I was about to go back inside, I heard footsteps on the fire escape. I turned around too fast, tried not to look too relieved, but there he was, climbing up with one hand shoved in his pocket, the other holding a grocery bag. "You brought snacks?" I asked, my voice already warmer than I meant it to be. He dropped the bag beside me and sat down. Can't make out on rooftops without at least some Twizzlers. I laughed, maybe a little harder than I should have. He didn't kiss me right away. Didn't even touch me. But the way he looked at me, it was softer now. Open, in a way he hadn't been before. "I freaked out," he said after a few minutes. "I figured." He looked down at his hands. "It's not that I didn't want it. I don't really do this. This connection thing. Letting people see me." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's scary." "I didn't expect to meet someone like you up here," I swallowed. "What kind of someone am I?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The kind that makes me want to stay." The wind carried a moment of silence between us. "You don't have to go anywhere," I said. "Not tonight." He didn't answer, just unwrapped a Twizzler, bit into it, and offered me the other half. We didn't talk much after that, just shared candy and leaned against the wall, like old friends who'd already said everything that mattered. Sometime past 2 a.m. he asked, "Can I crash at your place?" My heart thudded faster than it should have. "Yeah," I said, "of course." He didn't say a word as we crept through my bedroom window and dropped onto the floor, like teenagers sneaking in. I flicked on the small lamp by my bed, and the warm light filled the room with just enough glow to see him. He took his jacket off, revealing a faded gray t-shirt and a few tattoos I hadn't noticed before. One on his bicep was a simple black line of text, barely legible. I wanted to ask what it said, but I didn't. He sat on the edge of the bed like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. I kicked off my shoes, climbed in, and patted the space next to me. He hesitated. Then, finally, he lay down. We didn't touch, not right away, But a few minutes later, he shifted closer, and then closer again, until his arm brushed mine, and I turned my head to look at him. He was already watching me. "Is this okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I whispered. "More than okay." So he moved a little more, turned toward me, rested his forehead against mine, and exhaled like he was letting go of something heavy. And that's how we fell asleep, breathing each other in, skin to skin, no space left between us. The next morning, I woke up before him. He was still on his side, hand under the pillow, face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. He looked younger in sleep, like the sharp edges had finally softened for a few hours. Like maybe, just maybe, he felt safe. I didn't move, didn't want to, just lay there watching him, wondering what the hell I'd do if he disappeared again. But he didn't. Not that morning. When he opened his eyes, he blinked slowly like he wasn't sure where he was. Then he looked at me, and he smiled. Not the careful, sarcastic one. Not the half laugh he gave when he didn't know how to react. This one was real. Quiet. Warm. "Hi," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Hi." We didn't talk about the night before. We didn't talk about what any of it meant. We just got up. He stole one of my t-shirts. I made coffee. He left a little before noon, promising to come back that night. And for once, I believed him. He did come back that night. And the night after. And the one after that. It wasn't always at the same time. Sometimes he'd show up right at midnight, climbing the fire escape with a smirk and a new bag of corner store snacks. Other times, it was later, closer to 2 a.m., and he'd be quieter, more worn down, like the city had chewed him up a little that day. But he always came. It became a kind of rhythm, a ritual. Rooftop first. Then my room. A soft kiss. A low laugh, his hand finding mine under the covers. He never stayed past morning. But that stopped bothering me. He was showing up. That was enough. One night, we were lying on the roof, both of us on our backs, staring up at the blank sky. It was one of those clouded nights. No stars. The city lights made the clouds glow a weird pink-orange, like a false dawn. "I used to come up here to be alone," I said quietly. Eli turned his head toward me. "And now? Now I come to find you." He was quiet for a moment, then reached out and slid his fingers between mine. It was the first time he held my hand without me initiating it. I didn't say anything, just squeezed gently. "I don't really let people in," he said after a while. "Like, at all. I usually bail before it gets to this point." "This point?" I teased softly. He gave a crooked smile. "Yeah. You know, the part where I start thinking about you during the day," I swallowed. "You think about me?" "All the fucking time," he said. "It's annoying." I laughed under my breath, but my chest was tight in the best way. "Then don't bail." He looked up at the sky again, trying not to. Eventually, he started staying later into the mornings, sometimes until 10 or 11. Once, he fell back asleep and didn't leave until after lunch, mumbling something about having to text someone named Jared to cover a shift. I didn't ask who Jared was, or what the job was. I didn't want to mess with the fragile thing we were building, but part of me still wondered. He didn't talk much about his past. I knew a few things in pieces. That he didn't really speak to his mom anymore. That he used to crash on a friend's couch. That he moved around a lot. He never said why. And I didn't push. Until one night, when he didn't come. No warning. No text. I stayed up until 3:30, pacing, checking my phone, even though he'd never given me a real number. Just the one in the matchbook, which I realized now he barely even used. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know his last name. All I knew was that he wasn't there, and it felt like someone had ripped something out of me and left the wound open. He showed up the next night, climbing onto the rooftop slower than usual. Hoodie pulled low over his face. When he got close, I could see it. His split lip, the edge of a bruise blooming purple under one eye. My chest went cold. "Eli," I said, stepping forward. "What the hell happened?" He tried to brush past it. "It's nothing. I'm fine." Are you serious? You're not fine. I said I'm fine. I flinched at the sharpness in his voice. He paused, looked away. Then, softer. Sorry. I just didn't want you to see me like this. Why not? Because then you'd ask questions. I care about you, Eli. That's not a crime. He winced. You don't get it. Then explain it to me. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked angry. Not at me, at himself, at the situation, at everything. You think this, he gestured between us, is easy for me? You think I know how to do this? To just be with someone? I've spent my whole life trying not to need anyone, and now you're here, and He broke off. Swallowed hard. I don't know what to do with that. I stepped closer. Slowly, like approaching a scared animal. You don't have to do anything, I said. You just have to let me stay. He looked up at me, eyes wet but not crying. You're the only place that feels safe, he said. And that scares the hell out of me. I nodded, throat tight. Then let's be scared together. And he kissed me. Harder this time. Desperate. Like he was trying to anchor himself to something real. We didn't go back down to my room that night. We stayed on the roof until the sun started to rise, curled up under one of my old blankets, his head on my chest, my fingers running through his hair. Neither of us said anything else. Because for once, we didn't need to. The thing about falling for someone like Eli is that nothing ever feels permanent. Not because he didn't care, but because you could tell deep down, he never expected anything in his life to last. Not a home, not a job, not a person. So every morning he stayed, just a little longer felt like a win. And every time he left without saying when he'd be back, felt like a test I was trying not to fail. We never said we were boyfriends. We never talked about the future. But there was a stretch of maybe 2-3 weeks where it felt like something real was taking shape. He'd crash at my place almost every night, leaving behind little pieces of himself. A hoodie on the back of my chair, his half-empty bottle of body wash in my shower, the scent of smoke and cinnamon gum on my pillow. We were becoming part of each other's routines. Quietly. Accidentally. One night, he even showed up with a backpack and said, I'm crashing here for a few days, if that's cool. I didn't ask why, just handed him a spare towel and said, You want the drawer under the sink? He looked at me like I'd handed him something priceless. Yeah, he said after a beat. That'd be good. The first time he woke up from a nightmare, I didn't know what to do. It was about 4 a.m. I woke to him, sitting up in bed, hunched over, breathing fast, sweat soaking through the back of his shirt. I reached out without thinking, touched his shoulder gently. Eli? He flinched but didn't pull away. I'm here, I said, voice low. He nodded, not speaking, just squeezing his eyes shut like he could will whatever memory was haunting him back into the dark. Eventually, he lay back down, pressed his forehead to my chest, didn't say a word. The next morning, we didn't talk about it. But when I left for work, I found the bed made and a note on the counter. Thanks for not asking. One weekend, I convinced him to spend a full day inside. No rooftop, no bar, no slipping out the window like some ghost at dawn. We made pancakes, watched dumb documentaries, sat on the couch with our legs tangled, half-dressed, comfortable in a way that felt foreign and right at the same time. At one point, he fell asleep with his head in my lap. I watched him breathe, brushing hair off his forehead, thinking, God, this is dangerous. I'm in too deep. But I didn't stop myself. Because even if it didn't last, I wanted this. Him. Us. Then, one day, he was gone. I came home from work and everything looked the same. Until it didn't. His hoodie was missing from the chair. His toothbrush was gone. The drawer under the sink was empty. No note, no text, no sign, just silence. It felt like I'd been hit with a slow-moving train I never saw coming. I waited. A day, then 2, then a week. The rooftop stayed empty. I went back to Haven once, sat in the booth where we first talked, but he wasn't there. It wasn't until the second week that I finally admitted it. He wasn't coming back. A month passed. Then one night, I was walking home late, half dead from a double shift, hoodie zipped up, earbuds in, not really paying attention, and I saw him, leaning against the brick wall near my building, smoking like nothing had happened. My chest clenched. I stopped in my tracks, didn't speak. He looked up slowly, like he wasn't sure I'd stop. When our eyes met, he straightened. "Hey," he said, voice low, tired. "Hey?" I echoed, my own voice sharp with emotion I didn't expect. "That's it? I didn't know if I should come back. Why'd you leave?" He shifted on his feet, exhaling smoke. "Because I didn't want to fuck it up. You were good. Too good. I didn't know how to be around that without breaking something." I stepped closer, heart hammering. "You could have told me. I didn't think you'd still want me if you saw the rest." I stared at him. This boy who only ever let me see him in shadows, under streetlights and rooftops. The boy who kissed like he was afraid I'd vanish and ran like he was afraid he wouldn't. "I didn't want perfect, Eli," I said. "I just wanted you." He looked at me, eyes shining. "I'm sorry." "I know." He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his shoe. "I don't have anywhere to go," he said, voice cracking. "Not really? Then come home." He stepped forward, hand shaking, and I pulled him in. We still don't talk much about the time he disappeared. We still sleep better on rooftops than in beds. But he stays now. Every night. He leaves clothes in my closet. He makes coffee badly and pretends it's intentional. He still wakes up from nightmares, but now he lets me hold him after. Sometimes we still go up to the roof, sit in silence, watch the city pulse below us. And sometimes he'll reach for my hand and say, "This still feels like the only place I'm real." I squeeze his fingers and whisper, "Same," because it's true. Our only conversation was on a rooftop at midnight, but I couldn't forget him. And I never will.